You said welcoming immigrants and refugees has been our country's unfair advantage, and coming from an immigrant family has been mine as an entrepreneur. How was your immediate reaction? How do you think the community in Silicon Valley has responded?
Well, I think it's been pretty loud and pretty consistent, not just in Silicon Valley, but across the country. One of the things I felt obligated to do was share my story with a platform, Reddit, which we built to be a home for conversation, and encourage others to tell their immigrant stories or their families' immigrant stories. And as of now, there are literally tens of thousands of comments, thousands of which are deeply personal and genuine stories of people whose families or they themselves came here, and an ethos of just how much they appreciate being here. And that's that secret sauce I was talking about. It's the fact that it is a constant rejuvenation of people who really, really, really appreciate this country in a way that someone like me, who was born in Brooklyn, can't fully understand, because I don't quite know just how good I have it. And you don't have to look too far in Silicon Valley to see so many founders that are immigrants themselves or children of them.
I mean, I think half of all those that have been born out of Silicon Valley have been run by immigrant leaders. What about the response, though? It's wonderful to be able to get up and put one's view across, and the comments that you've sparked have been numerous, and there's a surge in terms of voice on the internet. But what about action? In terms of activity, we are seeing demonstrations, legal steps, and some donations, of course, going to the ACLU. But is this tangible enough?
I think it's a start. We actually basically donated our front page and all the advertising there to the ACLU yesterday. I think we're finding more and more opportunities, whether it is in civil protest, which is a very, very American right, donations to groups like the ACLU that are working hard to make change and protect our rights and our constitutional rights in particular, and then also just good old-fashioned phone calls. 5 years ago, I was part of hundreds of thousands of Americans who defeated two really bad bills, SOPA and PIPA. And those bills were considered inevitable, and about 4 months later, unthinkable. And that's simply because people picked up their phone, called their representatives, called their senators, and said, this is bad. This is bad for America, and here's why. And so I think it's going to take all these things. The internet, platforms like Reddit are very powerful tools to connect people. But at the end of the day, it takes individuals to actually create change. And some of that is just old-fashioned phone calls.
Are you optimistic it would be unwound?
I'm very optimistic, and I have to be, because this great experiment that is America is constantly in motion, constantly in flux, and I really do believe constantly moving forward. We are always trending in the right direction, even though sometimes it feels like a step backwards, which is why I wrote what I wrote. But I believe we're going to get there through more discussion and not less.
How much would it actually hurt Reddit, for example, if you couldn't have immigrant talent?
Well, I mean, we're only about 150 strong right now, but we had a number of people within the office who themselves are immigrants to this country, or who have families who were. And so it was very clear for everyone involved just how important an issue this was, not just for us to be able to hire the best people in the world to come here and create value and create more jobs, but also for the spirit of our platform. We want, we're very proud of 280 million monthly active users, but we still have a lot of growing to do, and a lot of that's going to come from having the most global platform possible. And to do that, we need to have voices and opinions within the company that are as global and broad as possible. So it's very important for our success as a company, and I would argue very important for our success as a nation.
Now, we've seen a lot of leaders in technology come out and stand opposed to what Donald Trump has done with the travel ban. Interestingly, some faster than others. I know that in particular, Uber has suffered a lot of criticism, and Delete Uber was trending. It has been hit on its rankings on Apple App Store. You are actually a supporter of Delete Uber, am I right?
I haven't publicly said anything about it, mostly because I don't fully understand the depth of it. As I understand, there was a decision made during a New York strike to keep running while taxis were not. But I've really only read one headline about it, so I don't really know enough to have an intelligent comment on it. Generally speaking, though, I think what we as citizens are really starting to appreciate is the effect social media can have on changing changing perceptions and changing actions. And so I think I saw a headline that Uber had made a significant donation now as a result, right? That happens because citizens take to platforms, they speak their voice, and effectively, make change happen.
What about the voice of Silicon Valley in Washington? There are Travis Kalanick's going to be one of them, Elon Musk, in an advisory panel. Are you pleased that Silicon Valley has this direct communication with Donald Trump? Do you think it might make an impact?
I don't know if it'll make an impact. It's still too early to tell. But I think it's important. I think one of the things that we saw even during President Obama's administration is that the more voices we can have who understand technology in Washington, the better. I think a lot of this just comes down to a lot of the people involved with making laws aren't necessarily technologists themselves. A lot of the tech stuff that we do talk about ends up being pretty straightforward once you can cut through the sort of technical jargon. And the question is, can we be up to the challenge of having the patience and having the grit to educate and to come not from a place of Silicon Valley snobbery, but come from a place of really, really wanting the best decisions possible to be made for our country around tech and bringing our expertise to the table as equals.
Talking of education, it's on a day where we have Facebook earnings, and this is a company that's had to fight off a wave of criticism to do with fake news. Now, news and the veracity of it is something that Reddit had to tackle, and is this something that your own network, that Facebook is tackling in the right way, that Alphabet is at the moment, and enough steps being taken, and is there any more that you'd like to see to be done?
So we were pretty insulated from the rash of the very sort of explicit fake news that platforms like Facebook saw, because often the perpetrators of it who were creating this news would try to game or cheat Reddit in order to bolster it onto the front page. We already have tools in place that work very, very hard to thwart people from gaming the system. And that's just sort of the nature of the platform. It's about trying to use those upvotes and those downvotes to make sure that good content bubbles up. Our community, as well as the tools that we have on the back end, actually do a pretty good job curbing the really obvious scammy stuff. But the big gulf, that gray area, is I think where we're still all trying to figure out how do we best address news that isn't explicitly fake. It's not just some random person who's built a fake website that pushes out obviously fake headlines, but are news organizations that aren't always presenting the full story. And we don't have a good answer for that. I think the trend that we are on is we want to give our users the most information. We want to give them the most ability, whether it's through other users crowdsourcing counterpoints or their upvotes and their downvotes. We want to give them the most information possible so that they can make the best ultimate decision possible. But this is definitely new territory. And what we've seen from the administration is that alternate facts, I think was the quote, apparently exist for them. And that's not a world that I think any of us are really familiar with. And so it's going to become more important than ever for the press to have a role in this world, because every functioning democracy needs a high functioning media. So we shall see.